Hey, Blair Packham here from SongStudio. Don't forget to like this video, share it with songwriter friends or people you think might be interested, or subscribe. Check out songstudio.ca for more information.
Here's another peek at what we did at SongStudio Online last August. Hope you enjoy.
One of our guests said, I believe it was just yesterday, that the business is, for better or for worse, all about relationships. That again, people will say the way they said about, I had these imaginary people saying about radio, well, you can't get my song on the radio, and complaining about that and so forth. And then the same people will say it's about who you know, and they'll say that as if that's a bad thing. Which I can see. It is a bad thing in a way. If you don't know those people, yeah, it's a bad thing. But it seems to me from what you said, describing Mark Howard, that relationships are important. You want to work with somebody you know and you trust and who's going to make your life easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, I would add reputation into that as well.
Yes.
Because, I think, I like to think, I'm fairly confident that I have a good reputation in this business. And, I think that, not that I haven't had my share of jackass moments, as we all have,
mm-hmm.
but, I've really sort of thought I've nurtured that, I guess, for most of my career, maybe not in the early days, but, when I realized that it was important. And yeah, so it's like, building those relationships, there's a lot of people that I've never worked with that I know I can call and even bend their ear, even if the end result isn't what I want, whether it's guys at radio. And, I've been lucky to have done, like sales and radio promo and, I ran Factor as well. So I've got that whole, thing as well, where you're like going into, I know the people at Heritage and I know the people, at Factor, et cetera. So having been that lucky to have done those things, it's, I can reach out to a lot of different people. And even if they're not going to ultimately can't help me, at least I can get some insight or some, some ideas of maybe the direction I should be pointing in, I guess.
Right, absolutely, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because humans are humans. We like, we want to feel safe, and like we're working with people who are trusted and so forth. So I think the remedy for that, for anybody who feels cynically that it's all about who you know, is to get to know some people.
Yep.
Get to trust some people, and don't position yourself as an outsider, but actually get in there and meet
100%.
people. Yeah.
100%.
What about what are good vehicles for doing that? Conferences, for instance?
Yeah, I think conferences are a huge one. I think, there's various, the problem is there hasn't been anything for 2 years or very little for 2 years. So I'm like struggling trying to remember all the things that, either I've done or I've suggested other people do, or I know that they do, music associations are great, I briefly ran Music Ontario for a couple of years, sort of just purely as a consultant until they resolved what they were going to do going forward.
Right.
And, they would put on events. So, wherever you are provincially, find out what your music association is. They'll usually put on, events like this or similar events, or showcase opportunities, both domestic and international, if you're at that level. Of course, conferences, key. I've been around the Canadian scene for a long time, and to some degree, a little bit the American scene, but I made a conscious effort about, 15, 16 years ago that, I would start going to European events.
Really?
And, it kind of couldn't have worked out any better than it did for me, because it really opened the door to Europe for me. And took many years, but it did. And, now I focus less on the US, because I just, where we're at with our labels, I think we have more success out of Europe, than we do out of US. And
interesting.
The Europeans seem to care more. Honestly, it's like, if I had a nickel for every, LA or New York meeting I had, in my career, they're really friendly and polite. And I don't want to say this, I don't want to blanket every American as this, but I feel like there's been a lot of situations where, sure, they're polite, they take the meeting, listen to your music or listen to your pitch, and then you just sort of like nothing ever happens.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah. In my experience, Canadian industry people were hard to get a meeting with, and
Yeah,
wouldn't return your call, and had lots of gatekeepers. You're trying to talk to Brian Hetherman at Universal Music might be difficult.
yeah,
But the American ones, because I think there's an attitude of, hey, you never know,
yeah,
they'll take the meeting, and
yeah,
they'll be, as you say, they'll be polite. In Nashville, the number of times I heard people say, "I sure am glad you brought your songs to me,"
yeah.
and the first time I heard it, I thought, "Oh,
I'm
great!
in.
Well, I've got
Yeah,
some more. Yeah,
yeah,
I've got some." Okay, and they were like, "No, well, I got to get going actually," but
yeah,
and I would realize, oh, I sure am glad you brought your songs to me means, okay, we're done, go away.
yeah, totally,
You know,
100%.
yeah.
In fact, I've heard that same thing 100 times in Nashville. So there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Everybody's so polite and nice,
Yeah,
Interesting, focusing on Europe. I wouldn't know where to begin if I were doing that myself, so I'll be asking you some questions. But in
yeah,
terms of Canada, the one that I went to a lot, the conference that I went to a lot was called the OCFF, the Ontario Council of Folk Festivals, but then
yeah,
now it's called Folk Music Ontario,
yeah.
and the FMO. And you must have spent a good deal of time at that one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, yeah.
love
So
that
that
one.
one or Folk Alliance or, for me with the Americana, et cetera, folk rootsy country thing, I've spent a lot of time at CCMAs and the CMAO and Folk Music Ontario, Folk Alliance, Americana Fest, Americana UK. So, yeah, with that kind of music, that's kind of those events are great because there really is, probably less with Americana because it's kind of a pretty big event now. It's almost like the South by Southwest of Americana. But, talking about those folk music events, just it's incredible. The performances in the hotel rooms and, people performing in the lobby. And that's an easy, if you're in folk music in any way, shape, or form, like whether it's, country folk or pure folk or Americana folk or whatever, you got to go to these events, man. These things are amazing.
And folk is such a broad thing now. It could be Southern R&B oriented gospel, played
Yeah,
by electric bands. Ingrid asks, and this is a great question: what is the difference between Americana and folk music?
it's a great question. I don't
Yeah,
know if there's an easy answer to that. I think certainly the Wikipedia answer to that would probably be, well, folk music sort of was created from a lot of sources, really. There's you'd almost need a musicologist to answer to give you the lineage and the direction. But folk music sort of came from, the British, whether that's Scottish, Irish, etc., bringing music over to North America. And even if folk music exists, obviously in the UK in its purest form in that way, but as the music made its way over, and transferred through the East Coast, and then with the Acadians being cast out of Nova Scotia into Louisiana, and then creating their whole Creole Cajun sort of music, and the influence of the black music coming up through through the Caribbean through New Orleans, where I guess it was a combination of products being brought from the Caribbean, whether that would be pineapples or whatever, mangoes or whatever it would be, and
molasses.
then slaves obviously would bring. If you've ever been to New Orleans, even if you just do the walking tour, they'll give you the whole history of I can't remember the square, Congo Square, I think it's called.
Congo Square. Yeah.
And so, I think that's kind of the answer to folk, at least, the transition of folk music from Britain and other places to North America.
Right, and the transformations it's made since it arrived,
Yeah,
sort of,
exactly.
and in its various forms from various places too. The banjo is an African instrument,
Yeah, it's just crazy.
yeah.
And you think about even things like, the thing that always fascinates me is, well, how did Mexicans get a hold of the squeezebox?
Yeah, right.
And the story is that if you go to probably Central Texas, most of the towns and cities are named after German cities. And that's because there was a huge influx of Germans in the like late early 1800s into Texas, and they brought their polka with them. And then, because, as Steve Earle says, Texas is Mexico, because there was such a massive, Mexican population already in Texas, because it essentially is Mexico.
Mexico, yeah.
They picked up the squeezebox and then adapted it into the Tejano music. And, so this stuff fascinates. So I could go on for days with this, so we'll move on. But it's like, this stuff fascinates me, right? Because it's like, I love all that music,
Yeah.
If I go to South by Southwest, you better hope you're not my passenger in the car, because the Tejano stations go on from the minute I get out of the airport, and I don't turn them off until I return the rental car. So,
That's amazing. I actually didn't know that about you, that you were such a fan of roots music.
Yeah, love that stuff so much.
Right. So conferences, a good thing. Going to conferences.
Yes, absolutely.
And what about songwriting contests? As a label owner and a manager of artists, songwriting contests, it could be easy to dismiss them as money grabs because they all have entry fees.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But have you ever worked with anybody who's gotten a leg up because of a songwriting contest?
Probably. I must admit that I don't pay much attention to that stuff, and it's not because I don't feel that there's value to what they bring, and it's not because I feel like they're taking advantage or scamming or whatever. I mean, it is easy to say, well, it's like $50 to enter, and but I mean, you look at the International Songwriting Contest for what I know about it, and they have judges like the dude from Matchbox 20, and like Lindsey Buckingham, and they get great people in to be judges. So it can't be that much of a scam, but these guys wouldn't be doing it. I'm sure they're not getting paid, and if they are, it's not much.
Yeah.
I guess I never really, I think 9 times out of 10, because I deal primarily 99% with Canadian acts, I pretty much know most of the people that submit for those things. Certainly the people that get into the top 50 or whatever the number is. They've already crossed my desk in some way, shape, or form, like whether it's they've reached out or I've reached out to them, or I saw them on social media, or a friend of a friend has brought it to me. I mean, yourself, Blair, having done this as long as you, well, at least as long as I have, probably longer.
Probably about the same. Yeah.
Yeah. You know everybody pretty much, right?
Yeah.
There's only a handful of people you probably don't know.
Yeah.
And, people are generous with, I mean, unless there's something amazing that they don't, like, it's like, all right, I've got this, and I'm never going to tell you anything about it because I'm going to manage it and be the label, etc. People are willing to share about, oh, did you check out this? Did you check out that? So there's very little I find I'm not somewhat aware of that goes on musically in this country because someone's told me about it,
Yeah.
So I guess that's the reason I've never paid that much attention to those things. And because I'm focused on more the whole, like not just the songwriting, but the record and the management, that's one component of the things that I do.
Thanks for taking a glimpse with us inside the SongStudio workshop from last August. Stay tuned for more.